Hey everyone, it's Ross from Mythic Mountains Tabletop Club. I want to introduce you to an upcoming role playing game called Knight Errant by Saint Caedmon Studios. This is a multimodal game, part war game, combat card game, has HEMA in it, a role playing game. It's got elements of old school Dungeons and Dragons and also Pendragon. But what I love about this is that this person that made it is inspired to make a heroic role playing game. And as I mentioned in my video about the hero's journey, I think that's something that's really been missing for a while. I love all kinds of role playing games, lots of different cultures and styles and experiences. There are different aims in role playing games. It depends. But I especially love heroism and old myth. And I love that this one man has a lot of passion, has put in a ton of hard work for years to make something that brings Arthurian romances in role playing games alive. And it does so authentically and sincerely. And I think that that is another perfect example of folk tabletop gaming. Take a look, consider supporting the project. Thanks. Everyone, it's Ross from Mythic Mountains Folk Tabletop Club. Tonight, I'm going to do something a little bit different than our usual actual play tabletop role playing games, similar to our Battletech actual play. I have with me tonight Andrew from Saint Caedmon Studios. And currently in Kickstarter is a hybrid game, is what I would call it. A mixture of a combat card game, a mixture of a war game with role playing, and it's probably the first time that this sort of thing has really been seriously brought together that I know of. Since games like calls to mind the origin of Dungeons and Dragons, like Chainmail, or especially Pendragon. Andrew, thanks a lot for joining us and showing us your game. Could you tell us a little bit, first of all, about Saint Caedmon Studios and also about your game and your Kickstarter?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me here, Ross. So, Saint Caedmon Studios, I started that 2 years ago with Knight Errant being our first product in mind. I started working on this back when we were expecting my second kid, and she's, yeah, almost 2 years old now. So, we've been working on this one for a little while. But, the idea came to me that in all the years I've played D&D, I've never played just a good old-fashioned knight. Why is that? We started with 3.5 for edition, so we had milk crates full of supplement books, and due to sunk cost fallacy, never moved beyond that, or never backtracked and kind of went to the roots. And you see a lot of cool stuff, kind of going back to the chivalric roots of fantasy. Paul Anderson's Three Hearts, Three Lions is a really big influence on us. So, Knight Errant is, you could probably call it high fantasy if you want to ascribe some genre terms to it. But I really wanted to focus in on chivalric elements, kind of a lot of Arthurian influence, and the ideas that nobility is very, every adventurer has a very distinct and clear cut place in the world that puts them above the average man, but that comes with obligations. You have oaths to fulfill, and going, a dereliction of your duties not only makes the world materially a worse place, but this inflicts metaphysical wounds upon the world. Every moral failing will kind of widen this wasteland that's reflective of like a mire of sins, or rather, the forces of hell are taking root in the world.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad that you brought up Three Hearts and Three Lions. It's one of my favorite books. I
Right
always say,
on.
like if you have to pick one book, like what is the book to understand Dungeons and Dragons, I would point to Three Hearts and Three Lions. I would say that's the book to start
Oh,
with.
absolutely. Yeah.
And our setting, this actually gives me happy feelings too, because this reminds me a lot of our setting, and maybe we could use some of this in our original D&D campaign, because that's the main fictional premise is Three Hearts and Three Lions, and it's very much like knights and castles and things like that. And that is like, I mean, I think it's unavoidable to look at the living campaign world of Greyhawk and not see that, to see that Greyhawk and the roots of D&D, at least that Gygaxian shoot of it, was very much knights and chivalry and heraldry and the obligations of station and nobility and place in society. And it had historical realism, or at least it had a component of realism to it, I think. So
Right,
yeah.
absolutely. I've seen a lot of guys who are better readers than myself, more literate than myself. Just kind of talking on Twitter, saying, "Yeah, your favorite author off of Appendix N really says a lot about you as a GM, and kind of defines your campaigns." And I definitely see that, because Anderson is absolutely my favorite off the list.
Oh,
Granted, I'm not
really?
as well read as I ought to be, but yeah, I can relate to you on that one. I've got kind of the feudalist societies, and there's some anachronisms thrown in, but it's, how I portray the medievals as they saw themselves. This is a grand quest for the Grail. It's not me attempting historical realism. It's not me attempting kind of. I
That's a
feel like a
good
lot
point
of,
too. Yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of portrayals, they try to, they get a little smarmy, like, oh, well, this is what medievals were actually like. Because no, I want to portray it from their own perspective,
Right.
where every day is a battle against hell. It's a very spiritually infused worldview.
Yeah, and every person was like, "This is my place in my fight. This is what I need to do." It was a completely
Yes.
different way of thinking. Yeah, and yeah, that's actually a great point, because I can think of some for me beloved kind of more medieval realism games. I think of Kevin Crawford's Wolves of God, which
Mhm.
loving that's like his day job, and lovingly he portrays the Englishman from maybe the time. Well, I think actually from the ninth century, actually. So that far back, with as much historical detail as you could probably get. I mean, he has a whole section on weir guilds and some things that are even kind of we probably can't even talk about on YouTube, but that's realism, right? And this to me, this has still that mythical quality. Like it really makes me think of Gawain and the Green Knight, like the story.
Yes, yeah, I
And
definitely try to go for like the Arthurian romances.
yeah,
Really kind of an idealization of it.
yeah. Cool. Well, and you've agreed to show me, like, we have a little sample combat here, an actual play of it. Please be patient with me. I'm very new to war games, and this is a little sample of mass combat, right?
Yes. And no
Okay.
sweat, I'm gonna need some patience too, because you'd think that I made the game, I'd be good at playing it by now. The issue is that I remember all previous 40 iterations.
Oh, that's an interesting
So
problem. Wow.
I've been working on this for too dang long. So
Right.
I'm happy that I can finally, punch it. But yeah, all the previous versions kind of swirl around in my head. I really got to reference the book for every little thing.
So let me kind of peel the game apart. Can I do that a little bit, and then maybe
Oh,
we'll
for sure,
get
yeah.
to fictionally, let's say where we are on the screen right now, because I what people are going to see when they look at the on YouTube, they're going to see a card game. They're going to have like cards.
Hmm.
And then a deck of cards or a hand that and you can't see my hand right down at the bottom.
Correct.
Okay. So, and then these cards are kind of spaced, and people are seeing zombies and skeletons. So let's get from the beginning and get there. Now, it looks to me character creation very similar to Dungeons and Dragons. It looks pretty old school to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the impression I get. Like almost like classical Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, AD&D was a pretty big influence on the kind of dungeon level of play. As far as small scale, and even on large scale, AD&D, as it is a war game. But as at least for like the dungeon crawling phase of character progression, super influenced by AD&D. Six stats. I think if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So there's some decent overlap. Nothing there should be too exotic.
Okay. So in that sense, they're going to make a classic fantasy role playing character, like in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, right? And
Yeah.
okay. All right. So
So
that
you have the knightly orders, which are basically, each chivalric order is kind of like a character class. So you have these different archetypes of knights that have their own specialties, and also really long and pompous names. The wards of lordly cedar are basically like druid knights of
oh, cool.
sorts. Not the kind of druids that flay people alive and sacrifice them.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, the biblically accurate angel meme. I just kind of think of that stupid meme. I think, oh yes, the biblically accurate druids. No, these are kind of the palatized ones. These are kind of like protectors of like the forests and whatnot. Like their order was charged with protecting kind of the outlying forests, kind of around like the analog to Eden and whatnot. So they kind of just like maintain these little like grows of purity. But so, they have a lot of thematic things relating to nature. They can use nature themed magic to a limited capacity. Part of it kind of has almost like a minotaur theme in that like they have exceptional bonuses to fighting in rough terrain or against cornered enemies. You have something like the Hospitallers of the Holy Barrow, who are very much like clerics. They can turn undead, they can smite, they can make holy water. Somewhere between a cleric and paladin, because everything in this game has the base level of being a fighter. You are a knight. You've been raised since childhood to fight on foot or on a horse. But then you add elements of fantasy character archetypes on top of that. So you have essentially sorcerer knights. You have kind of ranger like knights. You have the cleric like ones, etc.
But every person is going to start out as a knight. Like, hey, that's what you're here to do. There's not a
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
And
so when you generate, you get your knight, and then you generate your manor. You could either do it so everyone in the party is part of one manor, or you could all do your own separate one. And that leads to some fun faction play and can lead to PvP if you'd like it to. But manors come with squires, which are basically you can graduate them to become knights, and they can kind of test or take challenges to see which class they will then become or which order they can join. And so that way you have options, because if you feel like you just don't like your original order, you can have backup plans, especially if you're sending someone on a long journey or whatever. They might be a little bit occupied for a couple weeks. You can experiment playing with a different one, see which one you like more.
okay. And then to kind of zoom out the cosmology, the implied setting or the stated setting is one in which I'm going to call it a kind of a Ragnarok, like apocalyptic on the edge, like a Warhammer. Like you have this force of order that is humanity, and there are actual demons,
Yes.
and the world is on teetering on the edge of collapse. And so, um, am I getting the setting? Does that sound about right? Is it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's one big distinguishing difference between, and I know you're aware of this, but it's meant to be much more hopeful in that things have gotten really bad, things have fallen apart. You no longer have the infrastructure really to mobilize huge armies across the world like was previously possible. But you do have more ruins than settled populations, or than settlements, for example. You do have a lot of wasteland in the world, demons occupying much of it. You're kind of behind enemy lines, but mankind is on the upswing. Things are recovering, and you're playing a very active part in taking it back. It's a reconquista, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Um, cool. Okay. So that's the setting, and then you make a character sort of in a classical Dungeons and Dragons sense. Um, Working with the group, you said you make a manor, you have squires. From that point, uh, if it were like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you get given the main loop of play, which the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide suggests is a dungeon or a maze.
Hmm.
In this case, what so is that actually, first of all, is that traditional role playing game setup true, that you have a games master, or a referee or a judge, and then you have players? Is that kind of how it works? And then you have the
Yes,
challenge and response.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a couple extra responsibilities on the referee, but yes, otherwise fairly
Is that what the
traditional.
game calls them, as a referee?
I kind of interchange. I'll say judge or
Okay.
intercessor, which is one of
Intercessor.
your
Cool.
roles, where basically you have two dice in front of you at all times. One is the nemesis die, and one is the intercession die. And so the nemesis die kind of ticks up when people break their oaths, when people fall to or when characters fall to temptations. It's basically this big nasty countdown until the forces of hell can make a big power play. Contrary to that is the intercession die, which will tick up when, say, characters forego their usual rest to keep vigil, or when they make self-sacrifices to abide by their oaths. That when they're basically forsaking temporal gain to abide by these holy obligations. And when the intercession die hits a count of seven, then the GM or the intercessor, who's basically the party's guardian angel, can then bestow a big blessing. This can range anywhere from like breaking the curse on an item. It can range from the intercession of like a previous player character that died in grace can then intercede on behalf of the party.
That's cool. Okay.
There's quite a few. Thank you. Yeah, there's quite a few different intercessions that they can pick from, but yeah, the GM is kind of playing the angel and the demon on the shoulders of the party, where they have to present a lot of stumbling blocks for the players, but also every time that the players can kind of band together and stay on the course, it is rewarded.
Okay.
These are fairly rare occurrences. You're not getting them like every single session, but maybe once a month, you'll hit the right boxes and you'll be able to get something. It definitely,
Okay, so it's
you
not
know,
something that happens all the time. This is something that's sort of ticking away slowly in the background, or it
yeah,
happens every so often. Okay.
yeah.
Um,
Part of it is basically to discourage like turtling or overly safe play,
yeah.
because for example, if you encounter an evil settlement and do nothing about it, that timer kind of ticks quicker, and
Yeah.
it's mounting chance of hellish incursion, or some big and very bad thing happening to the map.
Yeah. So there's two things that, and we'll do our kind of example of play here, and then if it's okay, I'd like to give some of my thoughts and hear some of your thoughts too. We'll kind of crack open the more the philosophy or the thought of the game but I just want to kind of overview some of how it works or how it might be different. I think most people that watch this channel, a lot of people that watch it, watch for our old school Renaissance games, but we also have
Mhm.
story games and indie games and things. So I just wanted to kind of describe the game as a whole. But
Yeah, right on.
there's two things. One, since you brought it up, though, this is one thing I have to ask is this is the thing. This is something I've never. I'm not going to say I've never seen it done well, but I've only seen it done in specific ways. In a role playing game, I've never seen concupiscence simulated. So I've seen a few things. One is it's abstracted, you don't get a choice, meaning like there's just a random chance that you're going to start being corrupted or you're
Yeah.
going to make the wrong choice, and you don't choose that as a player. It just sort of randomly happens to you in the same way, like the One Ring, for example. That can happen, and that's pretty cool because the shadow in the One Ring, there's also this aspect of, hey, this isn't just something you choose, it's also something happening to you, and then as it happens to you, it's going to get worse, and you're going to want to choose it because it's going to start
Right.
putting you in the vice. So that's a pretty good take on it. So that is to say, I don't think it's a bad approach. And then I've also seen the maybe Dungeons and Dragons itself, which just, hey, you have this alignment, you're aligned with law, and then ultimately there's no disincentive. There is no concupiscence, and I think that can be good too because,
Mhm.
like in our original D&D game, people get to choose to be heroic, and I mean, I don't get to choose that in life. So that, and I want to talk about that at the end is, like I am horribly not heroic, so like it's good to have something to inspire us and to aspire to. So that can be good. But
Right.
so my question is like, how can you convey this concupiscence, this innate flaw that all these knights must have? Otherwise the virtues mean nothing. Like there
Exactly.
has to be some vice squeezing them to say, no, you'll probably choose the wrong thing. Like that's Sir
Right.
Gawain in the Green Knight, that like, the whole story is him just being put in this vice constantly of
Exactly. Yeah.
temptation. Yeah.
And that the Green Knight is basically deputized to do that to him. He's testing his metal.
Right.
Um, so there's a mix of both. There are some scenarios, some temptations where you're basically just rolling against your grace and you're seeing. In the cases where agency is taken from you and it's resolved through dice, it's easier to get back on track. Basically, you can put yourself kind of through the ringer through the proper penances and restore what was lost. But that itself is its own quest because it's going to set you back quite a ways, and you basically have a target on your head from there from further demonic ploys. The other one is that there are temptations that are just really materially great. Like if you cave in, you're suddenly a cut above everyone else in the room, but that came at a cost. Another aspect of that too is basically there's called false promises, where you can take that material gain and you can choose that, and now I've lost grace and now I'm going to be the target of future temptations, and I've got this black mark on me, but I might have like a cool magic sword from it. The issue is
Yeah.
that they can take it back whenever they want.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's
And
another,
that's
I think
yeah.
one game. This is not a tabletop role playing game, but maybe one of the best games I've ever seen do this is the second Dawn of War game. I don't know. There's like, and you have, and there are these space knights, the space marines, and they have this corruption where they're exposed to chaos. And
Right.
I think what happens that is kind of cool. First of all, it allows you to make these choices and see the consequences. So you can see these brothers that you develop this emotional connection with begin to fall and begin to change over
Mm,
time. And the imperative is, if you never, and I have mixed feelings about this too, is what the game does is it takes that kind of like the Dark Knight Joker archetype where it says, all right, I'm just going to put you in an impossible position. If you never choose what is evil, then you have to have complete faith that it'll work out, and you have to have complete acceptance because, and you have to have no sense of it's up to me to pull this off. Because if you do, and you have this sense of like, well, either I'm going to figure it out or it's not going to happen, then you're going to pick up that cursed sword because of the thing you love, or whatever. So
Right.
that's a good approach too. I've seen a few different approaches, and this seems like a very big part of this game. So yeah, I wondered about that. Okay, and then the other thing, real quick, before we kind of get here to why we have zombies and skeletons facing spearmen and foot knights, is the loop of the game. So here you are, you've made knights, you've got this nightly fast, the stronghold that you either share or you each have. You have squires, and you have an intercessor who can see the pool of darkness and try to lead you back from it, and so on. And that also represents the game master, which I would say is true of Dungeons and Dragons, right? You're both God and Satan as the
Yeah.
arbiter of the world. Um, uh, you know, uh, so here you are. So what is it that the knight does? What is the central? So Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to be the same. You're going to create your character. You're going to start in some sort of hold fast, some sanctuary. You're going to
Mhm.
journey across a wilderness to an underworld maze, and that's classical Dungeons and Dragons. And then you're going to try to get treasure, which is how you win and progress, and you're going to try to make it back again.
Right.
So, what is the core gameplay loop? What is the thing that the knight does?
So ultimately, you're pursuing the grail. The first thing that happens wherever you start is that you have a premonition of where the grail might be hiding. And so you might have, 3 places or so marked on your map. I leave this a little bit. I give GM some options. But it might lead you to search for the grail in a dungeon. It might lead you to search for it in ruins or a small fort. But no matter your adventure, you're chasing the grail very immediately. And these premonition, each time you reach your location where it can be found, you might get a glimpse of it or you might touch it. And this comes with great blessings, almost like a very minor lesser wish that can heal one of the problems with the overworld. My way of starting the game is basically, a classic D&D. You start, all right, you're in a town. Nearby there's a dungeon, and nearby there's a dragon. Cool, I have options. The way I start Knight Errant, you start off in a town. Nearby there's a hostile occupied fort, and nearby there's a dungeon. So I can maybe hire some men at arms and see if we can take that fort, or we can start off in the dungeon, get some gear, get some loot or some money, come back, hire some troops, and then try it. So you've got options, but
So there,
each option is weighed by time cost. Essentially, it's a huge loss if all my guys need to recuperate. Now, what's gonna happen if the monsters in that fort go off and they start pulling slaves? They start making alliances with other monsters in the area.
right?
Always trying to disincentivize turtling. Knights should be doing. They should be daring.
Yeah.
So the Grail serves as this divine engine that drives most adventures, if not all adventures, in a campaign of Knight Errant, because the each time you've kind of had that foretaste of the Grail, it moves somewhere further and further away. Where after like the fifth iteration, it might now be on the other end of the country or in a new region. It might be on the deepest level of a dungeon where suddenly laws of physics get a little bit muddled, and this is now entering into eldritch territory. Each kind of chapter, I suppose, in the progression of this Grail quest becomes such a massive undertaking that it spawns out, whole new webs of side stories, new characters. Even at like the final iterations, you might need to launch a grand crusade and overthrow an entire kingdom of evil aligned humans, for example, or hellsworn humans. You might need to take on. There's a faction of vampire knights who pretty much hold in a rough analog to real life. They might hold pretty much the equivalent of the entire Baltic states in terms of landmass. This is a pretty significant territory, and you're going to have to, you know, muster entire armies, bring together entire factions. It's going to take a while. You're going to have side characters that naturally develop out of this, or, you're going to make new adventuring parties to kind of build up and flesh out the world around you. But it's all driven by this very board gamey objective that is just, I want to grab this cup. I want that grail.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Okay, so here we are. We're questing for this grail, and things go awry, and we enter the combat phase of the game, and this is a hybrid card game. It looks like, right? You've got I don't play those, but like I guess you would call it a combat card game. Like you have different cards and you can, like so, uh, plus dice. So you have the stats, the cards, and dice,
Correct.
and we're going to demonstrate mass combat. But you're saying that the actual the actual combat procedure is the procedure itself is the same, right? Except the distances are different. The effect on morale might be, but generally speaking, the actual procedure, whether it's simulating a crusade, as you said, or a battle between two knights, is the same, except there are aspects of the procedure that are going to be bigger or different. But the actual
More or
procedure is the
less.
same, right? Okay.
Yeah, mass combat, a lot of things do get flattened down a little bit for simplicity.
Right.
Two knights dueling might have a lot of granularity where you can have the angle or orientation of attack has a big difference in what can go on. You can kind of manhandle, like with grappling, and reposition an enemy into a disadvantageous place. One of my favorite little like side rules is called hammer and anvil. So if you're hitting someone with a crushing weapon like a pole hammer,
Okay.
and their back is against a wall, if I'm hitting you up against that wall, I'm getting bonus damage because you're just getting your ribs crushed on both sides. So there's a lot of very fine, kind of minute details where you can squeeze in an advantage over your opponent. And
This part looks like simulation, even. But it looks like I thought like HEMA people might actually appreciate this.
oh yeah,
Where
I've done a bit of HEMA. I will never claim to be an expert. Um, I just really like combat sport. I like fighting, and I really wanted to capture a couple aspects of fighting with this combat system. Mostly that as you're fighting someone, you can adapt to their fighting style. And I'm sure you could do it with D20, giving like a slowly mounting increase in rolls over the enemy. It's not a very thrilling way, I suppose, to capture what is exciting in fighting and saying, oh, wait a
yeah,
second, I know what this guy's going to do. And reading someone, reading your opponent is like the greatest high in the world, I swear.
yeah, my friend who's the co-host of the he's one of the admins of the Play Club, and then the co-host of the podcast we do. He loves war games, and what he loves about them is this poker aspect, like this sense of
Right.
like you don't know, and I'm holding this deck, and I'm trying to read you and guess your move, and that's not quite there in Dungeons and Dragons in the same way. So
Yeah.
it's like adding that in more, so it's kind of cool. So
Yeah, and I'm sure there's even ways to accomplish it with AD&D, but the way that I kind of capture it on the smaller scale in this is that weapon choice is super important too, where there's a large disparity in what weapons do. I just talked about how crushing weapons, you get someone pinned with that and you're getting bonus damage. Axes ignoring shields for a considerable amount of time. Well, now, I'm wasting an entire arm holding the shield, and I don't know if it's actually going to protect me. That's a big issue. So what am I going to do about you? A lot of small differences, and there's others. Another thing too is the cards in your hand almost act like a stamina bar or a resource to be managed throughout a fight. There's more complex things you don't see in mass combat, like weapon locks, where if I attack and you guard, or we both attack into each other, there's some circumstances where I can say, all right, well, I'm locked with you, and now it's almost like war. No, no, sorry, not the war card game, but basically I can just keep discarding cards and make you discard too, and we're kind of playing chicken at that point. Who's gonna tap out first?
Wow,
Because
that's
if
cool.
you run out before me, I've got actions of opportunity. I've just got free pot shots, and I'm just gonna go at it.
Yeah,
So if I know I can press into you, I can either make you disengage from combat, which is bad because then my buddies can run you down, or we can shoot at you with missiles, whatever. Or I can start grappling you to the ground, put a knife through your visor, or whatever. A lot of it at the middle to higher levels is resource management. Mass combat, the cards are really just straightforward. It's more just the cards are preserved from the skirmish level so that you can have the two things happen simultaneously. Like with this little mock combat that we put together, if I wanted my player character to have like this big, almost like Bronze Age style duel with yours, if we want to be
right.
Achilles and Hector while our armies are fighting on the side, we could, and the just everything would line up correctly with the time of the passing of the rounds, and we I could very seamlessly go from killing my rival in this one-on-one to then joining in the mass combat and then embedding in a unit.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so here we are, and we've decided to assemble and siege that this fallen stronghold. Actually, or it looks like we're meeting in the field. And in fact, I'm the bad guys. I have a small army of zombies and skeletons, and um, I guess what I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but what are they called? Nazgul, Veil
Yeah.
Riders, uh, Banshee, and you
They're
have
cool
some
skeleton cavalry.
cool skeleton cavalry. Yes, and so here we are. So I they it looks like they've been assembled on the field, and the like you so this distance is abstracted. You said right, so we'll say maybe that's
Yeah, I didn't say we usually just do theater of the mind with
okay.
my play testers, so we can just say this is really straightforward, and just say everyone's one round of movement away from each other. Most units, I think zombies are really slow. They have like a 6 inch move, so in a dungeon, 6 inches would be 30 feet. In the overworld, that gets expanded to 30 yards, just so that, in the overworld, crossbows don't have this ridiculously short range. Or other, missile weapons. AD&D does the same thing. You just kind of expand the scale once you're above ground, and
Right.
the measurements make a little more sense that way.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, we can say we're 30 yards from each other. So I won't get a whole lot of mileage out of these crossbows. If I get initiative, maybe I'll get a volley. That's okay. This is really just to show kind of the inner machinations of everything. So I'll give a rundown on my list. So I've got 2 units of 10 crossbowmen. We got them on the flanks. They've just got light crossbows, a dozen bolts each. They got hand axes as their sidearms, and they're just wearing t-shirts. They've got nothing for armor.
Okay.
I've got 20 spearmen, so I got 2 units of 10. They've got short spears, heater shields, and full chain. I've got foot knights here. I got 12. Oops, I lost my little pawn. I'm just showing this little pawn here is to show that my player character is embedded in this
Mm,
unit. So when a character or an officer is embedded in a unit, the whole unit uses the officer or character's morale die. So normal humans have D6 for morale, but knights have a D12. So that's a pretty significant step up. These guys are going to be pretty steadfast, God willing. So 12-foot knights, they're armed with halberds. They have arming swords for the side, and they're dressed in full plate. My player character is a level 4 Kingsman. So that's kind of like the fighter analog. And like I said, every character in this game is kind of a fighter. So this is like fighter squared. He's got a long sword +1, enchanted with fiery weapon. So he is the only person here who can hit your ethereal banshee. This would be like a pretty sweet find for level 4. I just needed to. I didn't want a stinking magic user in my list, but I needed some way to kill that banshee. So yeah, we'll say he got lucky. And then on the side here, we have 10 light lancers. So these are light war horses. The guys on there have full chain, and they have lances. And on the side, they have arming swords.
okay. All right. And then I have a banshee, um, 12 veil riders, and then we clumped together here like as like this undead horde. On the flank, there are 40 skeletons and 80 zombies.
Yeah, and what was it? We say 30 skeletons have falchions and heater shields, and then 10 had great axes or battle axes.
Yes. Yeah. So, all right. So, what is the first step of combat since these forces have encountered each other?
Sure thing. So I'll let you do the honors as the host. You can roll a d6 first for initiative
All right.
for the movement phase.
I got a 2.
All right, 2. Well, we're tied. Reroll. Let's
Okay.
go again.
5.
Uh-oh. 2. All right, so you
Oh
win
no.
initiative. Everything. Zombies are the one caveat. They will always act as though they lost initiative. So you can move
Uh,
everything up first. So your options, you can just do a standard move or you can do a charge. I personally don't recommend charging into spearmen because they can brace like in AD&D, which would double their output for damage into charging units.
right. Okay. I think I will not charge, but I will engage this flank here.
Right.
I don't know if this is like AD&D. Does that mean I can't attack if I? So I'm not charging the spearman.
Yeah, so
Or wait, we're in movement phase, so we're gonna do it by
yes.
phase, right?
Yep.
Okay,
So yep, and then we're gonna
gotcha,
do another initiative roll after all the moves are done.
gotcha. All right. Oh, cool. Okay. All right. The Veil Riders. I am going to send way off to the side, like
Yeah,
that.
and they're really fast, so we can. I know we're just kind of abstracting the distance, but yeah, you can absolutely, you can charge those into the crossbows. That would be a good. So here, I don't want to set you up for failure, so I'll give you your options. Let's say you do charge. My crossbowmen may brace, but they don't have pole arms, so they can't.
Right.
They may countercharge, which would be stupid, but fun. Or they can fall back, which just means that they make their move backwards. It really throws them off. Their shooting is going to suck in the action phase. The thing is that if you commit to charging them and they fall back, then the Lancers can countercharge you.
Ah, cool. Yeah, nice. All right. So, yeah. So these riders are trying to. Well, let's just say that I'm foolish, and this banshee, she thinks she has it, and so we commit to a charge to the crossbowman. So
Sure.
I'll declare that. Then this banshee will just try to torment the closest mortal men here, and
Well, hey, they can't hit her back, so that's free real estate right there, bud. All right. So that's all your moves except for the zombies. So I'll begin. My crossbows here. We're gonna fall back, and we're gonna charge our lancers into the Veil Riders. This is gonna be a
nice.
fun one. So spearmen, they're locked in. You're tearing that unit apart. There's nothing they can do. Foot knights. I'm actually going to separate my character from that unit. He's going to declare charge on the Banshee. We're gonna do the, we're gonna do the Leroy Jenkins charge, and either I die or you die. But there's no changing that one. Foot Knights, we're going to walk them into the skeletons. I'm not gonna charge. So because your Banshee was already engaged, your options, like you don't get the counter charge or fall back, etc., because you're already in melee. So that's all set. And you know what? I forgot that I was supposed to, before anyone rolled for initiative, I was supposed to
Oh,
declare attack with crossbows. See, I don't even remember my own rules.
I forget. Me and Richard, I think, have not forgotten declaring spells and firing missiles at the top of the round for the past 6 months. So, like I don't know what it is. It is, but yeah, I don't remember
That
spells
makes
and
me feel a little
missiles.
bit better about it. Well, we're just we'll be lenient today. We'll say that these 10 crossbows, we'll just pretend that I did say that. These 10 crossbows are going to shoot into the zombies.
Okay.
So that'll be the end of the movement phase. We've actually, sorry, you can move your zombies though.
All right, the zombies are going to try to help.
All right, yeah, these guys are cooked. So I'm gonna roll initiative now. 3. All right, I'll take it.
Got a 6.
Ouch.
Oof.
All right. So, real quick, the results of the charges resolve before we go into the action phase. You kind of have the secret third phase, which is the shock phase. So, we'll resolve in the order that they were declared. You didn't declare any charges, correct?
I did the Veil Riders versus the Crossbowmen on the right
Okay,
flank.
yeah. And so they fell back. Lancers going into the Veil Riders then will resolve. So 10 attacks going in. So I can just put this here. There's nothing there's nothing else they could have done when charging, but sometimes just the visual cue is helpful. So you guys do have a guard.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I can play it immediately in response?
Yes, you are allowed to guard. So the way this works is how many? You have 12 riders.
I have, yes, 12 riders.
Okay. 12 riders, I have 10 lancers. So I might have got your hopes up for nothing because earlier I was talking about strength and how, adjusted strength might make it so you're unable to guard an attack. So I'm going to pull up the rule book. I'm going to check the adjustment on strength for a lance on a charge and see how that all comes out. Because if the math basically shows that our adjusted strength is more than double yours, well, these attacks are going through. So
All right.
let's see. Veil Riders, what is your strength? I think 10?
15.
Oh, 15. Holy crow. Yeah, you're fine. Okay. So they get to guard. Now, mass combat is the only place where guarding can fail in Knight Errant, where otherwise, the orientation of your card determines if it fails. Here, we're doing a random roll. So you're rolling against your morale, which is kind of an approximation or an abstraction of like failing to hold discipline, right? Like, like orcs have a really low morale roll. So if they fail to guard, it's because they're chomping at the bit. They just want to keep attacking, that they're not even thinking to protect themselves.
Okay.
So you're undead, which means that you guys have some of the best morale in the game.
Yeah.
So really you have unbreakable morale, but that was incredibly overpowered in mass combat. So I make them roll on a d12.
Okay.
Which we said we're just going to take averages because it's really a pain in the butt to roll a million dice on this platform. Versus, if on Discord you got a dice bot, you can roll 80 d6 like it's nothing.
Right.
In this case, your average is just one guy would fail his roll. So that would probably just be one death, because I'm looking at lance. You're charging with a lance, it's triple to damage. The average damage on it, oh, where did I just have that? Here we go. Just a d6, but I'm adding a charge bonus, a very healthy charge bonus of 6 damage. So 9. You guys have piercing resistance 3 because you're bony. So the one lance that goes through probably just like gets stuck in the ribs or something. There's not a whole lot to stab on you guys because you got 9. Yeah, so you have just one wounded rider from a whole charge.
All right.
We couldn't even bring down one of you guys. That's not good. So yeah, one of them has he has 2 HP down from 8. But otherwise, you guys are A-okay.
Alrighty.
All right, easy day. So shock phase is already resolved. And now we go on to the action phase. So you've won initiative. So you guys, basically you can just set out for every 4 speed that your units have, they can play 1 card in this phase, up to the maximum limit of either 3 cards or however many are basically in your hand. So I should have said the ones that we just used in the shock phase, those are kind of spent for the round.
Okay. All right.
So one of the benefits of charging is just that you can get your hits in
Right.
Before, you don't have to count on winning initiative in the action phase.
Right.
It's kind of guaranteeing that things go through. But yeah, so my Lancers, their attack is spent. So yeah, you can now start playing everything but the zombies.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, the skeletons have a speed of 10, so, and the skeletons have, I think according to this,
One attack and one guard.
one attack and one guard. So I will play them both, or is the guard like a reaction like that you can do?
So you can just play them out both out because essentially each action card you're playing gets repeated for every one of your guys that's in engagement range, if that makes sense. If you're playing a guard, that means that, let's say, because you got a blob of skeletons, I've got 22 guys in that melee. So your giant blob of skeletons can effectively guard against every single foot knight that's in engagement range, for example.
Okay. All right. So,
That being said, you'll want to distinguish whether you're guarding against the spears or the foot knights. The foot knights have crushing weapons, the
right.
back end of the halberd. You probably want to guard against that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yep.
Spears won't do a whole lot to skeletons.
Right.
So attacks. On that note, you probably want to attack the spearmen. They've got much worse armor. Granted, you still could get those foot knights. So I'll leave that to your judgment, but
Yeah,
plate armor is very strong.
I'll guard against the foot knights and attack the spearmen.
All right, perfect.
The banshee has 12 speed, so I think that's 3 actions.
Yes. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. We didn't resolve the charge with the character in the banshee.
Ah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got so wrapped up in doing combat
no, I
math
forgot
with
about
the
that, yeah.
lancers. That's all right. So let's see. So the banshee can't even defend because she's ethereal. Ghosts don't think to guard. What are you gonna guard? So I got one attack from the Kingsmen on the charge. Longsword, the average damage of 3 plus 1 because it's a plus 1 weapon. And this is doing damage as fire. So it actually does go through. So that would be, it said 4 damage. And I believe that it's written that charge bonuses don't get applied against ethereal enemies. So the Banshee took 4 damage from that charge. And that attack card is spent from the Kingsman.
All right.
Okay, so that's taken care of. Sorry, back to business.
Nice. No. Yeah. Let's see. So, she will. Oh, this is the biggest threat on the field. Then she faces the hero, of course.
Yes.
So,
and you did read her special ability, correct?
it says that a morbid wail that's ear splitting instantly kills any combatant within 4 feet radius who hears her and fails a valor save. You can only scream once. So I assume that would take one of her actions, of her 3 actions. Okay. She will do that. Valorous Knight. Let's see.
All right, perfect. So
Now,
let's see on level
this
4.
Valor stat is does the stat shift, or is this like an attribute, Valor?
Yeah, it shifts. It increases with level, and you can get a flat bonus from your Constitution, which I just assumed a Constitution of 10. Here, I got a D10 here, so I'm gonna roll. The first one is gonna be like the tens place for percentile, and the second roll is going to be the ones. So I need to roll below a 35. This guy actually has a pretty low save just because 10 con, and let's see. That's a dead knight.
Oh no.
That's a dead knight. So that's fun. Let's check the spearmen who have a base save of 20%. That's an entire unit dead.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
Terrifying.
The funny thing too is that I made your list first and then made mine, and I gave myself a lot of pointy weapons that do nothing against skeletons. So this is just something that can happen.
Yeah.
Skeletons will naturally ally with Veil Riders because they're cavalry for them. Banshees are intelligent and very actively malicious compared to skeletons and zombies that are just kind of puppets. So, she might be kind of the leader of the pack. So we just lost our character and a whole unit. So that would force morale checks on everyone in the room right now. I mean, you're still getting all of your attacks resolved this round too, but
Yeah.
that's
And at this point, too, I don't think anyone can hurt her. She's just going to be a
no,
nightmare. But this is actually reminds me of chainmail. We had a situation. Uh, it's very much like chainmail because we had a Balrog, and
oh boy.
and there are a bunch of enemies like that that can't be harmed. And I think this is, I assume, the precedent for this in D&D. There are monsters that cannot be harmed except by magic weapons.
Yeah,
And that's true. A Balrog can only be harmed by a magic sword or
yeah,
or a spell. And they took out the one guy with the one magic sword, and then it's like there's no fight here because no one
right.
can stand against this thing. So
So let's at least like
yeah,
resolve out this
yeah,
blob
I want
over
to see
here
that.
just
Yeah,
to show some mechanics, and then I'll say GG after that. So you're guarding against the Foot Knights, so I'm gonna play their attack.
yeah.
And I didn't have this written, but just to demonstrate for the audience, I'll show something. So your men at arms can upgrade a little bit. So they kind of get like chevrons from repeated deployments and high success rates, low
Oh, I
mortality rates,
love that.
etc. So eventually you can spend, like for every 3 chevrons, I can buy an extra action for their action pool. So
Okay.
these are veteran Foot Knights. They were able to buy a second attack card. So we're really just going to hammer into these skeletons with the back ends of our halberds. So I got 12 attacks. You're able to guard. You've got 30 skeletons. So you can guard all of those. Then I've got another round of 12. So 24 attacks into your 30 guard. So you can negate those all. If you were outnumbered, some would just be unguardable, and that's just flat damage coming right in. But you outnumber us, so this huge volume of attacks, like I said, we're taking the averages. You have a really high chance, or really low chance of failing your guard. So on average, we're only getting 2 hits in. Of course, the crushing end of the halberd is some pretty big boy damage. That's 3 crushing damage, which completely negates your armor save. So that would be 2 dead skeletons. But yeah, this is a pretty big loss right here. Sorry, the channel popped up an ad for me. So I'll wait till that goes away.
This
So
episode brought to you by whatever that
yeah,
was.
exactly.
Just went away. That's all right. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Brought to you by gosh, I don't know any of those ghost hunting shows. We could have used some of their help. So yeah, you just killed my commander and a whole unit. This would prompt morale checks out of all of us. Um, Let me pull up the matrix. It's not looking good for us having lost a knight and a full unit. Morale. So there's just like a kind of a matrix with various things that either increase or decrease it. So, if you're fighting information, you have higher morale, base morale, but when your formation is broken, that turns into a negative modifier. If an ally knight is incapacitated, it's a negative, but if he's killed, it's a much larger negative. Things like that.
Yeah.
I try to keep it as dense as possible so you don't have to do like 30 different calculations just to see what you got. So it looks like, gosh, we are failing this on anything but a 6. Yeah, we're out. So there's rules for pursuit and whatnot, which we would begin, but I'm pretty sure that your blob here has these guys bogged down. So spearmen, foot knights, they're going nowhere. Good chance the crossbows could get out, just because they're not engaged. They've got a little bit of distance between them, and they're faster. These crossbows might get away. It depends on whether your Veil Riders and Banshee are going to chase the Lancers or chase the crossbows. The Lancers are wicked fast. Sorry, my mana came out there. They're wicked fast, bub. 24-inch move speed versus the Veil Riders 16. So, there's a chance here, but
Yeah.
it's not looking great. Had we won but sustained serious casualties, there's a role to, as long as basically it's safe to remain on the battlefield, there's a role to recover. Say some of your casualties were injuries, or they can be brought back, which has a fun tie-in with what is called campaign abilities for each knightly order. Just kind of bonuses they get to overworld adventures, because I really wanted to emphasize the overworld versus the dungeon, because a lot of my playtesters were kind of scared of mass combat, which, I mean, you can see why. It can be scary if you just have
Yeah.
the wrong matchup and you don't know it. It can be really bad. My those lancers, if they charge into orcs, we would turn them all into bacon.
Yeah.
That would have been a very quick mop up. We would have broken that unit very easily. It would have fled, and we would have just kept killing them while they're retreating. But against skeletons who take little piercing damage, that's a big problem.
In this way, oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
actually.
Yeah, so yeah, matchup is important. But anyways, campaign abilities are kind of to encourage some more overworld adventuring. But the Hospitaller is kind of the cleric analog. They get a big bonus to casualties that can be recovered at the end of mass combat, because they're kind of like your chaplain knight. They're tending to the wounded and bringing people back from the brink. So it's good to have kind of diversity in the party. On the other hand, it's it's entirely viable to just have everyone belonging to the same order. All fighter party, it'll work. All ranger party, it'll work. You just weapon choice is so important that you can really shore up a lot of your weaknesses in having a diverse blend of weapons. You look at my list here: spears, crossbows, halberds, lances. Almost everything we do is piercing damage, which against skeletons is a no-go. You have piercing damage negation. You basically you soak three, and most of our weapons only do three. That was bad. The halberds with the crushing damage, solid, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah. What on that level, tactically deep, like simulation is what I would call it, which um, is delightful. It's very rare, but um, what was I going to say? The other thing at the same time, apart from the systems that you're describing, like the weapons and the effects and
Mhm.
the math from the tables, I guess it makes me think of chainmail. And the thing is, where it doesn't have those system elements of specific weapons and things, is that it's that was really fast. So we chatted for a while, and then this whole thing happened pretty fast, and came down to decisive moments, which is
Yeah,
what's interesting anyways. um, and even if it hadn't been a hero and a banshee, I could also see it being the lancers and the veil riders. And if
right.
one flank had collapsed and one resolution of morale had occurred, the entire battle would have turned on that hinge of morale or a unit
Yeah.
becoming available. And this
Um,
whole thing is very fast, actually.
yes, absolutely. That's one thing that my play testers really caught on to, is that it's explosive. Um, it's fun in that, you more of the tension comes from the fact of, if I make a misplay, I'm gonna know it. I don't typically do the taking average from dice rolls. That was more just because we don't have a whole bucket of
But
dice
we would have
handy.
systems to do that, or we would have the dice
Exactly,
if we
yeah.
were in
Say on
person.
Discord,
Yeah.
you could always roll big batches, or I've got little towers of like 30 d6s that I love throwing those all day. I could do that.
Yeah.
I could do that 12 hours a day and be happy. So, on that note, if that knight on his charge rolled a little higher, because what, your banshee has 7 health? Yeah, I did
Yep.
4. So if I had rolled high and killed her on that charge, that would have been colossal. That would have been the collapse of your biggest piece. The knight could have then pivoted to fighting the riders who were bogged down with my lancers, because that would probably be a stalemate, where the lancers had good chain and chain armor, versus I think your veil riders had scythes, which have like no AP.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of a tar pit there. So he could have gotten involved and picked a couple off. Yeah, it could have gone either way. And like you said, there's these decisive moments that really shape fights. One of my very first play tests, when combat was a lot cruder and before we fixed some problems, there was one fight that was super cool, and we still talk about it now, where basically we had a small party. They had hired maybe like four archers, and there was four knights, and I think two squires. So yeah, like 10 guys. They just picked up a contract to fight two man eaters, which are kind of like they're like very far removed from Nephilim. They just look like really big people, and they're terrifying and have a lot of health, and they're very fast. So they picked up this contract to fight them. They're going on the road outside of town, and they get to a crossroads, and these man eaters are coming back from a raid, and they basically just walk right into each other because it's just the terrain. They had no chance to see each other, like point blank. So immediately these man eaters get behind the knight's lines. They failed to kind of screen them out, and already they've killed the archer character. Just caved his head in with
Oh gosh.
two overhead attacks with maces. So we had those archer men at arms at least. So the fighter squared, the Kingsman, his solution is to get into a fight with the man eater, and so he plays a feint, makes it think it's gonna attack, and so it guards itself. At which point he grapples, kicks it away from the party, so he actually pushes it outside of melee range, and then they win initiative, and the archers just lit him up with arrows, and they killed him. So his quick thinking of basically like, all right, I'm gonna be a screen, I'm gonna fake him out, I'm just gonna punch him, or I'm gonna push him outside of engagement range. Then we get shots in, because he just knew that the arrows had a much better chance of like getting the burst damage in and killing him before he could retaliate.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And also, what I like about that story is it's all set. Excuse me. It's all set within the context of an emergent, unscripted living world, where like
Yeah,
this is just a world where stuff is happening, and then this is what unfolds and happens in it. And I just think that's really special. I mean, the people that are watching that, like they saw our Braunstein, or or they're into old war games like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or something, probably they aren't going to be that surprised by campaign play. But the
right.
people I know that play war games don't talk as much about campaign play. I know that BattleTech has it and stuff, and
Yeah.
Warhammer has a meta game and stuff. I get it, um, but I think that's something that's really special, and that's something that where those two worlds have separated too far between
Yeah.
war games
No,
and
actually,
role playing games.
something I had meant to mention earlier when I was talking about the formation of Saint Caedmon Studios is I felt a campaign-sized hole in my heart every time I played Warhammer. I'm just thinking to myself, like, yeah, tournament rules are fun, but if you're picking a perfectly symmetrical fight, you're kind of a bad tactician.
Yeah. Yeah, that also came to mind. Is that it's like this clearly seems like a game where you want to fight on your terms. And so
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
probably going to fight losing battles and interesting emergent situations where you need to flee or use trickery and things. And anyways, just yeah, I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So Andrew, if I obviously I love this project. One of the things I wanted to share about just the idea of this in general. There is the specific kind of mechanics of it, which are really cool. Things like the I would call it like HEMA. It's not that deep, but it's because then that would be very. This is very simple and streamlined, but it
Right.
has depth. It has more depth than Dungeons and Dragons, but but I think what I really like about this project is about Knight Errant is there's I think there's a huge problem in role playing games, and this has been my experience with it. Is back I ran Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition for like 5 6 years, so
Mhm.
mostly modern Dungeons and Dragons. The assumption of modern Dungeons and Dragons was heroism. It was that you were going to be a hero, and
Right.
now I mostly run old Dungeons and Dragons now, and that does not have to be the assumption at all. Maybe you're not
Yes.
even a
Yeah.
good person. You're just trying to get rich. And
Very, very mercenary.
yeah, yeah, it's very much like Sword and Sorcery, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and Conan and stuff. And
Right.
that does not mean that heroism doesn't come from it. But anyways, so here we are, fifth edition, and the other thing is the culture of play is very different. Where in the games I run now, I just make a world and then I step back and I
Hmm.
say whatever. And if there's a story that comes from that, it just comes out of that. In the same way that you go on a hiking trip with your buddies, you don't go for a story. You just have stories. Like it's just a
Right. Yeah.
consequence of doing that. And anyways, with fifth edition, that was the opposite. I went into it saying, how can I thrill? How can I entertain? How can we create a story? And I was constantly trying to weave and present things to sort of orchestrate this cathartic outcome. Anyways, I saw a problem, which this is what I would sum it up this way. My priest calls it Kung Fu Panda heroism, which is like there's this like general cultural aspect. I can at least say in the United States where in media you're a hero. Why? Because you are. You're special. Why? Because you are. You know, and that's true. I think of someone being special. That's true. Or the dignity and importance of a person. That's true because you're a person, and that is true in and of itself. But that is not true of heroism, and
Right.
that is a inherent glaring flaw of those stories, and it's constant. It's in film and in video games, and the expectation in fifth edition was that you would go and be violent and powerful, and that made you a hero. And what a inverted story, really, actually, of how that works. And the only way that you can be a hero is which I think is great. Like that's good to seek stories like that and have games, but it requires sacrifice. It requires conviction. It requires virtue. You can't do it
Right.
without it, and it's not just given. And in fact, you have to give.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and what we encountered, we did a level 1 to 20. It took us 1.5 years, I think.
mm,
Is it one? No, 2.5 years for 1 to 20 for Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition. They were literal gods by the end. Plane shifting,
oh wow. Yeah. Yeah.
echoey, booming voices, godlike powers, fighting, literal gods. And all the player experiences at the end were exhaustion, and they because um, it's not their fault, but like we went into it saying, all right, we're going to be heroes. Well, what does that take? And I had to be honest. And what it took
Right.
was it was like real life. It was responsibility and burden and sacrifice and failure.
Yeah.
And so like here they had this game where they wanted to escape and they're like, gosh, I have to actually deal with real problems. And actually that can be kind of tough. And like I mean in a game. And so like
Right.
if you want to be a hero, it will come at a price. And anyways, that what I see in this game is it says you will have to be forged. Like you will have to actually go through a kiln to actually get that. And by the way, your hero died tonight.
Yeah.
So I wonder how his squire feels when we get back to the keep
Right.
with the two
Exactly.
surviving units of crossbowmen that come back in tatters, all their friends dead.
Yep.
So
Yeah. That was a very swift end. Who knows why they sallied out there, but it was quick. It was explosive. They couldn't have seen it coming, or maybe they could have and just said, "Well, it's my duty. I got to fight him anyways."
yeah, yeah,
But
right.
there's a lot of reward for that kind of thing.
I suppose
There's
that's the
a
question: is do you actually want heroism? Like, do you want a
right.
story like Knights? because this is more like what that would be. It would be like Knight Errant, which
Absolutely, yeah.
and that's honest. Anyways, I really like that about it. And at the same
Thank you.
time, we should aspire to that. And so I would love to see more games that are honest and they're like, this is a game that's going to demand something of you, and it's going to test your character. Your character is not going to be given this, and by that, then they can be a hero. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a couple mechanics that are really minor where I tried to reflect that, like choosing a vigil over rest. So rest, you restore some endurance points or your HP. Instead of that, and you refresh your spells if you're a spellcaster. Well, I just don't know why you would ever play one of those. No, you can choose between that or a vigil. A vigil is, you stay up all night in prayer. So you're going into your next adventure dog tired. You've regained nothing. You're losing out on temporal necessities, but this is something that will help keep your intercession die high. It doesn't even add charges, but it stops them from decaying because going too long without virtue or too long without something noble and heroic will cause it to just kind of tick back down. So you have these. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of a word. I don't want to say unsexy, but that's kind of it. There's not much appeal. It's a little martyrdom.
no,
It
that's
doesn't
true.
seem very, I wouldn't see it on like a Frazetta painting
That's right.
to of a man skipping out on dinner or skipping out on sleep to pray. But that's the
That would
little
probably be a
martyrdom. It's like
classical painting. That would be one made
exactly.
like
It's like
500
it's
years ago. So,
right. It's not something that I would really want to do, but it's something I should choose every now and then. It's something that every man has the choice to make. I could cut out creature comforts and replace them with prayer, but that's hard. And a big message of Knight Errant is just, hey, it's hard. You could even give up on the Grail quest to pursue something noble like starting a family or retiring or leading a city or a nation or whatever, and it's expected. Sir Percival was exceptional when he rode past this castle that was now owned by like the most, his childhood love, and she says, "I want to marry you," and he just kept riding. Who could do that when everything they've ever wanted is offered to them? And it's not like there's no catch. It's just that the opportunity was there and he could have everything and he could be happy.
right.
And he stops and thinks, the only thing that can make me happier than that is to be united to Christ through the Grail.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that that is the mythic quality of a story is mythical stories that are enduring are really hard, and sometimes they're very uncomfortable. Like while you were talking about that, like abandoning the quest for the Grail makes me think of Gilgamesh, like a kind of
Right.
archetypal example where eventually he, you know, in the beginning, you think it's the hero's journey because he passes through the threshold and they encounter the bull of heaven and they do all these things and with Enkidu, and then
Hmm.
ultimately in his love of Enkidu, he has to sacrifice it and it looks like a failure in the end. And
Right.
actually, and those kind of stories, is it a failure? And I don't even know that the story answers that question. But myth, I think it's great to have stories uh, like what Tolkien would call a fairy story, which must have a happy ending. Fairy stories must have a happy ending.
Right.
Ultimate, fairies don't, but
Yeah.
a fairy story must have the full cycle of the hero coming home and being happily ever after. Uh, but
Hmm.
but myth does not, and Arthurian romances do not necessarily. Even the fate of Arthur himself, depending on the story, and the fate of the one true king and the lands of Albion of
Right.
Englishmen. Is that is it actually just all lost? Actually, maybe and so anyways, these really kind of these are heroic stories, and so the kind of expectation that I had in our role playing games for the longest time was heroism, but the cultural milieu was one where it assumes at the start you're the hero, and
Yeah.
that what the result was actually incredibly villainous in my opinion, incredibly venal, and because it was selfish, solipsistic. It's all about my character.
Right.
It's all about like how can my character feel cool, and it actually played out that way because they were so powerful and they had powers that they would sometimes exercise those powers even in capricious ways.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really the opposite of heroism. It's actually quite dark. Um,
Right. Yeah,
so
I've long held that kind of modern fantasy has the issue of like cynicism and insincerity. You look at Appendix N, like Robert E. Howard's Conan stories. At least it's sincere. It paints a picture of a
yeah, it's
man
sincere.
who's
That's right.
who's yeah, he's a man who falls to very understandable vices. He likes money. He likes women. He likes glory and fighting. Yeah, I mean, so do I. And you just compare him to everyone, every villain he encounters who's just so much worse. Like the story for Red Nails, where he goes into this kind of ancient lost kingdom, and there's just this nasty vendetta, this blood feud, where you have this ancient people just like knifing each other in these dark gutters and alleyways that they've been stalking for generations. Or I can't fully remember the details of the blood feud, but he's very disturbed by these heinously vindictive and resentful people, and they've got very perverse and underhanded ways of dealing with these things. At least Conan, with his flaws, is sincere. He's just a very straightforward man. So
Yeah,
I'll always kind of hold Appendix N as like it's honest, which I love, but the romance is, I want something that's part of my inspiration is I wanted to make something for my son who has, because he's 3, has no cultural immune system, and I don't think he'll have one even as a young adult because I'm not going to hand down my Warhammer books. Maybe I'll wait until he's an adult because you've got your books that gosh, I love Warhammer, but when the phrase "the orgy of death and slaughter" is used on like every other page,
well,
someone
like
who
even Warhammer, the problem of giving that to your 3-year-old son is that there are these layers upon layers of cultural context, going back
exactly
to when Rick Priestley put just something that was just kind of dumb and sloppy and wild and crazy, and then it coalesced into to something else in time. There's a lot of like assumptions and context there. And I would say that's true of Appendix N, where as far as cynicism, you go from Robert E. Howard. That by the time Dungeons and Dragons comes out and Moorcock is releasing new wave fiction, Elric is deeply cynical and
right.
self doubting and self reflecting and sensitive, and you're constantly inside of his head. And meanwhile, back with Kroll is just like, I don't know why that thing screams in that temple, but I'm going to punch it. And then it just stops screaming. And,
Yeah.
like these are very different places we get to.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
like the problem with this kind of like, really, flat, materialist, anti-heroic, solipsistic mythology, by which, and I maybe, here I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat. Maybe the super corporatized soup that we've gotten for a long time, maybe that's part of why it has lost that mythical quality, which it did not that long ago not have. It had it. One of the consequences, I think, is a really unnatural relationship with death,
Right.
which actually reveals, like, and this is true. Like, look, I ran Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition for years, and it was overwhelmingly the truth that the system was afraid of death. It basically, it was like whack-a-mole. Like
Whack-a-mole,
you'd
yep.
get knocked down, and then somebody do healing word, and you were back up, and it was utterly meaningless. And it completely removed any sense of consequence or tension, and what it really felt is it felt super dishonest. It was like, man, we are too afraid to die. And why is
Right.
that? Why is it that we're too afraid to die? Because the consequences of the loss of myth are that we want to ignore death. We want to pretend it's not there. Like, surely there's no death, because that's the thing you can't defeat. And then the second thing is that if it's all about me and my character, then I lose everything that is good and important. I have nothing left if I lose that. And Knight Errant offers the opposite. That you can be this guy and it can say, all of my lands and all of my friends and everything I believed in and everything I fought for is more than me. And I'm not going to lose everything just because I died. And that is true of Conan in a way. Like, that is a heroic story where, heroes, I mean, those stories are about death.
Right.
Tolkien would say that is the main theme is death. And so that's being able to confront that and have something that's more important than your own life then is a much healthier relationship. And then, if your character dies, which sucks, I mean, it does suck, but if your character dies in a role-playing game, you don't lose the whole game, you don't lose everything.
Right.
So that's another thing. So anyways, a heroic role-playing game, not just about chivalry and specifically, or this specific context that it's set in, where it's sort of like in the Arthurian romances and things, and are the specifics of tactics. All of that looks really cool. But to have a role-playing game that is like, let's have a truly heroic game, like where you can be a hero and do it honestly, that's exciting and rare.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just one reflection of that. I think the distillation of it is that if your character, puts down his life for one of his subordinates or one of his companions, that's just a huge boost to his grace right before he dies. Essentially, is that you even in your final act, you can kind of guarantee a win condition. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Like that's very Christ-like, frankly, to sacrifice yourself. If you're the one who holds the line in the dungeon, and you know that you're not coming out with everyone else, that's one of the most heroic things you can do.
Yeah, and I think it's great that these games allow us that mythopoeia, that ability to kind of like see into that, the moral imaginative, the formation of the moral imagination in that. And I think sometimes in our 5th edition campaigns and games, the beauty is that this stuff would happen in spite of itself. That's probably
Right.
the beauty, is that, like, as many problems as it would inherently create towards solipsistem and my character, um, the moments where someone was like, actually, my friends are more important.
Yeah.
And all of us, and I love my friends so much, and everybody I played with, I have such fond memories of all of it. They're such beautiful people, and they have their hearts and their souls. Like it's beautiful. So, like, they're poised to demonstrate that humanity. And so, sometimes that would happen in spite of the game.
Right.
And that's true of these classical games. I think sometimes I think about that, and I look forward to games like this, where I was just thinking, I was like, man, I know how to make a adventure game now. Or, I mean, I know how to run one, I know how to create a game where you're trying to get treasure. I know Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. No offense to the people that love the One Ring. I like the One Ring. Okay, look, I like it. It has a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, by the way. Like, there's this like pull toward the shadow and temptations, and you're on this journey.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think it accomplishes that, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. So that's my hope of games like this that come out that like that aren't, the answer wasn't just to be cynical and say, well, maybe we just can't be heroes. How sad.
Right.
Actually, no. Let's be aspirational, and but also sincere and honest. And so that's cool. So,
Thank you.
anyways, yeah. Thanks a lot for spending the time with me, Andrew, and going over the game and showing it to us.
Absolutely, brother. My pleasure.
Mythic Mountains RPG is a private online play club that focuses on folk RPGs. Folk RPGs are the games that belong to all of us. They're what actually happens at a table between friends. It's their voice that has the authority on what is fun and what works for them. Weekly, we upload our games to allow others to sit in with us. The channel isn't monetized. We don't own the artwork, music, software, or games shown in these actual plays, and you can find links to their authors in the description. Like, subscribe, and share if you wish, or don't. Just like games in person, you're welcome to pull up a chair, sit in, and watch some of our games. No performances, no fancy equipment, just regular people playing folk pencil and paper role-playing games and having a good time. We hope these games will prove a source of enjoyment to anyone just wanting to listen in, anyone looking for examples of how actual groups run and play folk RPGs, and most importantly, if you haven't found your group yet, you're welcome here at ours.